Lila's hands trembled as she watched the scalding coffee seep into the pristine white shirt of the man whose reputation alone had emptied half the cafe in seconds. The morning had started badly and gotten worse. Her ancient Honda had wheezed its last breath in her driveway, forcing her to sprint the 6 blocks to Moonbeam Cafe in her work uniform. She was already 20 minutes late, and her manager had a zero-tolerance policy for tardiness. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she burst through the cafe's front door, her ponytail askew and her apron clutched in one hand. She didn't see him at first. Her focus was entirely on the employee entrance behind the counter, on clocking in before anyone noticed just how late she was. She grabbed the coffee pot from the warmer, the one she'd forgotten to turn off the night before, and spun around. That's when it happened. 6 feet 4 inches of solid muscle met 5 feet 6 inches of frantic waitress in a collision that would change everything. The coffee pot flew from her grip, its contents arcing through the air in a perfect, devastating arc before splashing across the man's chest. The silence that followed was deafening. Lila looked up, way up, into the face of nightmares. Dark hair swept back from sharp cheekbones, a jaw that could cut glass, and eyes the color of winter storms. But it wasn't his devastating good looks that made her blood freeze. It was the way every other person in the cafe had suddenly found somewhere else to be. Chairs scraped against the hardwood floor. Newspapers rustled as they were hastily folded. The barista behind the counter had gone pale as milk and was edging toward the back exit. Within 30 seconds, the busy morning crowd had dwindled to just her, him, and poor Jenny cowering behind the espresso machine. "I'm so sorry," Lila stammered, grabbing napkins from the nearest table. "I didn't see you, I was running late, my car broke down." She reached toward him with the napkins, intent on helping, but froze when his hand shot out to catch her wrist. His grip was gentle but immovable, and his skin burned against hers like he was running a fever. "Don't," he said quietly, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through her bones. Lila tried to pull back, but he held her firm. She looked up into his face and saw something that made her heart skip. His nostrils had flared slightly, and he was staring at her with an intensity that made her feel like prey. "I said I was sorry," she whispered, very aware that they were now alone except for Jenny, who had apparently decided the coffee beans in the storage room needed immediate attention. The man, because that's all he was, just a man, despite the way her instincts screamed otherwise, tilted his head slightly. Like he was listening to something she couldn't hear. His grip on her wrist loosened but didn't release. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lila." The word escaped before she could think better of it. "Lila Hayes." Something shifted in his expression. His free hand came up to hover near her face, not quite touching, and she caught herself leaning into the warmth he radiated. "Lila," he repeated, like he was testing how it felt on his tongue. His eyes, which she now realized were more silver than gray, seemed to glow in the morning light streaming through the windows. "I'm Cale." She knew that name. Everyone in 3 counties knew that name, even if they were smart enough never to say it aloud. Cale Blackthorne. The man who owned half the businesses in town and controlled the other half. The man who could end careers with a word and had a reputation for ruthlessness that kept grown men awake at night. The man whose coffee-stained shirt probably cost more than she made in a month. "Oh God," she breathed. "You're." "I know what I am," he said softly, finally releasing her wrist. But instead of stepping back, he moved closer. Close enough that she could smell his cologne, something dark and woodsy that made her think of midnight forests and dangerous things. Lila's heart hammered against her ribs. She should run. Every instinct she had was screaming at her to run. But her feet might as well have been nailed to the floor. "I should go," she managed. "I should let you, your shirt." Cale's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone with surprising gentleness. "You have no idea what you are, do you?" The question made no sense. "I'm a waitress who just ruined your day." "I'm so sorry, I can pay for the shirt." "Mine." The word cut through her babbling like a knife. It was barely more than a whisper, but it carried such weight, such absolute certainty, that it stopped her cold. What? Cale's eyes had begun to glow, actually glow, with an inner light that had nothing to do with the sun slanting through the windows. His hand was still cupping her face, and she realized with growing alarm that she could feel heat radiating from his skin. Not normal heat. Something wild and primal that called to parts of her she didn't understand. "You heard me," he said, his voice dropping to something almost like a growl. Lila jerked backward, finally breaking free of whatever spell had held her frozen. "You're crazy. I don't even know you." "You will." He straightened to his full height, suddenly every inch the predator she'd instinctively recognized him to be. "Very soon." She backed toward the door, her hands shaking. "I have to go. I have to work. I'm sorry about your shirt." Cale didn't move to follow her, but his eyes tracked her every step. "Running won't change what you are, Lila Hayes. Or what we are to each other." "We're nothing to each other," she shot back, her hand finding the door handle. His smile was sharp enough to cut. "Keep telling yourself that, little wolf. We'll see how long that lasts. Little wolf." The words hit her like a physical blow. She stared at him for one more heartbeat, then yanked the door open and fled into the morning sunlight. Behind her, she could swear she heard him laughing. Jenny emerged from the back room as the door swung shut, her face the color of old parchment. "Sweet Mary and Joseph," she whispered. "Do you have any idea what just happened here?" Cale picked up a clean napkin from the counter and dabbed at his ruined shirt, though his attention remained fixed on the window where he could still see Lila's retreating figure. "Yes," he said quietly, his eyes beginning to fade back to their normal storm gray. "I just found my mate." Wanting to see what would happen next, subscribe to this channel to get to listen to more of our upcoming exciting stories. Click on the subscribe button now. Thank you. Chapter 2. The roses arrived at 7 a.m. sharp, 24 blood-red blooms that made Lila's tiny apartment smell like a funeral parlor. She didn't need to read the card to know who'd sent them. The elegant script simply read, "Until you stop running. K." She dumped them in the dumpster behind her building and tried to pretend her hands weren't shaking. That had been Monday. By Friday, her entire life had become a carefully orchestrated nightmare. Tuesday brought white orchids to the cafe, delivered during the morning rush with enough fanfare to make every customer stare. Wednesday, a designer handbag appeared on her doorstep, Italian leather worth more than her monthly rent. Thursday's gift was a pair of diamond earrings that she'd returned to the jewelry store without opening the box, only to have them redelivered with a note from the manager explaining that Mr. Blackthorne had purchased the entire store's inventory for her. But the gifts were nothing compared to the watchers. They were everywhere now, men in expensive suits who lurked in coffee shops across the street from her apartment, who browsed magazines in the grocery store while she shopped, who sat in cars with tinted windows outside every place she went. When she'd confronted one of them, a mountain of a man with kind eyes and an apologetic smile, he'd simply said, "Mr. Blackthorne's orders, miss. For your protection." Protection from what, he wouldn't say. "You need to take this seriously," Maya insisted, sliding into the booth across from Lila at Romano's Pizza. It was the one place in town that felt safe anymore, too public for any of Cale's mysterious games, too crowded for private confrontations. "Do you have any idea who you're dealing with?" Lila rubbed her temples, trying to massage away the headache that had been building all week. Everything felt too bright, too loud lately. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed like angry wasps, and she could smell the garlic from the kitchen with crystal clarity 3 rooms away. "He's some rich businessman with boundary issues," she said. "I get it. But I can handle." "Rich businessman?" Maya's laugh was sharp with hysteria. "Lila, honey, Cale Blackthorne isn't just rich. He's dangerous. My cousin Sarah worked at his company for exactly 3 weeks before she quit and moved to Portland. You know what she told me? The man has meetings at midnight. In the woods. And the people who cross him? They disappear. People don't just disappear, Maya. Don't they?" Maya leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Remember Tommy Greco from high school? He tried to muscle in on one of Blackthorn's construction contracts 2 years ago. Found dead in his car a week later. Heart attack, they said. Tommy was 26 years old and ran marathons. Lila's stomach churned. That's probably just coincidence. Jessica Chen dated him for 3 months last year, then broke it off. She transferred to a college in California overnight and won't return her mother's calls. And before her, there was Angela Morrison. Stop. Lila held up a hand, the headache spiking behind her eyes. Just stop. You're trying to scare me. I'm trying to keep you alive. Maya reached across the table to grab her hands. There are rumors, Lila. Weird ones. About him and his family and what they really are. People say. A crash from the kitchen cut her off, followed by shouting in rapid Italian. But underneath the chaos, Lila heard something else. Footsteps. Heavy ones, moving with predatory grace across the restaurant's front entrance. She turned in her seat and felt her blood freeze. Cale Blackthorn stood in the doorway of Romano's like he owned it, and for all she knew, maybe he did now. He was dressed more casually than she'd seen him, in dark jeans and a black sweater that clung to his broad shoulders, but his presence still sucked the energy from the room. Conversations died mid-sentence. A child started crying 3 tables away. His eyes found hers across the crowded restaurant and held them. That same silver glow flickered in their depths, and his mouth curved in a smile that made her think of wolves showing their teeth. Oh God, Maya whispered. Oh God, he's coming over here. But he wasn't. Instead, Cale claimed a table in the corner, one with a clear line of sight to their booth. He ordered coffee from a trembling waitress and settled back to wait. Watching. We're leaving, Lila said, standing so quickly she knocked over her water glass. But we just. Now. They fled through the back exit, past the confused cooks and out into the alley behind the restaurant. Maya's car was parked on the street, but as they rounded the corner, another familiar figure stepped into their path. The mountain from Tuesday's grocery store smiled apologetically. Ladies. Mr. Blackthorn would prefer if Miss Hayes used the front exit. Get out of our way, Lila snapped, surprised by the growl that crept into her voice. The man's eyes widened slightly, and he actually took a step back before catching himself. I'm sorry, miss, but... The sound that emerged from Lila's throat wasn't entirely human. It was low and threatening and seemed to come from somewhere deep in her chest. The bodyguard's hand moved instinctively to his jacket, and Maya grabbed Lila's arm. What was that? Maya whispered. Lila stared at the man who was now looking at her with something that might have been respect, or fear. She didn't know what had just happened, but the strange sound had felt as natural as breathing. Let us pass, she said quietly. The bodyguard hesitated, then stepped aside. They hurried to Maya's car, neither speaking until they were several blocks away. Lila, Maya said finally, what the hell was that back there? I don't know. And that was the truth. Just like she didn't know why her vision had suddenly sharpened to the point where she could read license plates 3 cars ahead, or why every scent in the car was so overwhelming she wanted to roll down all the windows. The changes had started Monday night, right after the coffee shop incident. At first, she'd blamed stress. The headaches, the sensitivity to light and sound, the way her hearing had become so acute she could track conversations through the apartment walls. But when she'd bent her metal apartment key in half while trying to unlock her door Wednesday morning, stress stopped being a reasonable explanation. And then there were the dreams. Every night, the same vision. Running through dense forest on 4 legs, her vision sharper than it had ever been, sending prey on the wind. In the dreams, she was hunting something, or someone was hunting her. She always woke before she could tell which. You need to get out of town, Maya said as she pulled up to Lila's building. Take a vacation. Visit your aunt in Denver. Anything to get away from him. Lila nodded absently, but her attention was caught by the black sedan parked across the street. Tinted windows, expensive rims, and the same license plate she'd seen outside Romano's. He had me followed home, she said. Maya followed her gaze and cursed softly. That's it. I'm staying over tonight. No. Lila was already climbing out of the car. I won't let him ruin your life too. Just go home, Maya. I'll figure this out. She was halfway to her building's entrance when she heard the sedan's door close behind her. She didn't turn around, didn't run, just kept walking with her key ready and her heart hammering against her ribs. The lobby was empty except for Mrs. Chen from 3B collecting her mail. Lila made it to the elevator and jabbed the button for the 4th floor. The doors started to close. A large hand caught them, forcing them open. Going up? Kale stepped into the elevator like he belonged there, like this was the most natural thing in the world. In the confined space, his presence was overwhelming. He smelled like winter forest and something wild that made her mouth water despite her fear. This is stalking, Lila said, pressing herself against the far wall. I could call the police. You could. He pressed the button for her floor. Somehow he knew which floor she lived on, and leaned back against the opposite wall. Sheriff Morrison is a reasonable man. I'm sure he'd be very interested in your complaint. The way he said it made her blood run cold. Morrison. Like Angela Morrison, the woman Maya had mentioned. The one who'd disappeared. What do you want from me? She whispered. The elevator climbed slowly, and Kale studied her with those unnatural eyes. I want you to stop fighting what you are. I'm a waitress. I'm nobody special. You're mine. The words came out rougher this time, almost like a growl. And you're scared. I can smell it on you. Lila's heart skipped. What did you say? Your fear. It's. He inhaled deeply, and his eyes flashed that unsettling silver. Intoxicating. The elevator dinged, arriving at her floor. The doors opened, but neither of them moved. You're insane, Lila breathed. Am I? Kale pushed off from the wall, taking a single step toward her. In the small space, it was enough to bring him within arm's reach. Tell me you haven't felt it, Lila. The changes. The way your senses are sharpening, your strength increasing. Tell me you haven't been having the dreams. Her mouth went dry. How could you possibly? Because I've been having them too. His voice dropped to something barely above a whisper. Every night since I met you. Running through the forest. Hunting. The scent of pine and moonlight and something that calls to every instinct I have. The elevator doors started to close again. Kale caught them without looking away from her. This is impossible, she said. Is it? Or is it the first thing in your life that's finally made sense? Before she could answer, he stepped aside and gestured for her to exit. Have a good evening, Lila. Sweet dreams. She stumbled out into the hallway on unsteady legs. The doors closed behind her, and she heard the elevator descending. She stood there for a long moment, shaking, before finally making her way to her apartment. Her hands were trembling so badly it took 3 tries to get the key in the lock. When she finally made it inside, she threw the deadbolt and slumped against the door. The dreams. How could he know about the dreams? That night, she barely slept. When she did drift off, the forest was waiting for her. But this time, she wasn't alone in the dreams. Something was running beside her, matching her pace perfectly. Something large and dark and familiar. She woke with the taste of pine on her lips and Kale Blackthorn's name on her tongue. The next morning, Lila arrived at work determined to take control of her life. She'd typed up her resignation letter the night before, 2 weeks' notice and a brief explanation about pursuing other opportunities. She didn't care if it left Jenny short-staffed. She needed to get away from this town, away from Kale, away from whatever was happening to her. The morning crowd was lighter than usual, probably because half the town was terrified to go anywhere Kale Blackthorn might show up. Lila had just finished serving an elderly couple their coffee when Jenny emerged from the back office, her face pale. Lila, she said quietly. Could I see you in the storage room for a moment? The storage room was cramped and dimly lit, filled with boxes of coffee beans and paper supplies. Jenny closed the door behind them and turned with tears in her eyes. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I tried to talk him out of it, but he wouldn't listen. He said it was business, nothing personal, but we both know." "Jenny, what are you talking about?" "The cafe," Jenny said miserably. "He bought it. This morning. Cash offer, 3 times what it's worth. The papers are already signed." Lila felt the world tilt around her. "What? Mr. Blackthorne owns Moonbeam Cafe now. Which means technically, he's your..." "No." Lila backed toward the door, but it opened before she could reach it. Cale filled the doorway, having to duck slightly to avoid hitting his head on the frame. In the small space, he seemed even larger than usual, more dangerous. "Jenny," he said without taking his eyes off Lila, "could you give us a moment?" Jenny fled like the building was on fire, leaving them alone among the boxes and supplies. Cale stepped inside and closed the door behind him. "Interesting timing," he said, nodding toward the resignation letter clutched in Lila's hand. "But I'm afraid I can't accept your resignation. You can't stop me from quitting." "Can't I?" He moved closer, backing her against the shelving. "You signed an employment contract, didn't you? 2 weeks' notice, effective immediately upon written notification to your direct supervisor." "Jenny's my supervisor." "Not anymore." His smile was sharp as broken glass. "Congratulations, Lila. You've just been promoted to assistant manager. Your new direct supervisor would be me." She crumpled the resignation letter and threw it at his chest. "You're insane." "Probably." He caught the wadded paper without looking at it, his attention entirely focused on her face. "But I'm also patient. And determined. And completely unwilling to let you run from what we both know is inevitable." "There is no we," Lila snapped, but even as she said it, she could feel something responding to his proximity. The same wild thing that had made that inhuman sound in the alley, that had been running through her dreams every night. "Isn't there?" Cale braced one hand against the shelf beside her head, leaning close enough that she could feel his breath against her cheek. "Your pulse is racing. Your pupils are dilated. You're fighting every instinct you have not to step closer to me right now." He was right, and that terrified her more than anything else. Despite everything, the stalking, the gifts, the bodyguards, part of her wanted to close the distance between them. Wanted to see if his skin was as warm as it looked, if those silver eyes would glow brighter if she touched him. "I hate you," she whispered. "No," he said softly, his thumb brushing across her cheek. "You hate that you want me. There's a difference." The touch sent electricity straight through her, and she jerked away. "Don't touch me." "Why?" "Because it feels too good. Because every time I'm near you, that careful control you've built starts to crack. Because you're a stalker and a psychopath and I want nothing to do with you." Cale laughed, the sound low and dangerous. "Keep telling yourself that, little wolf. But we both know the truth." There was that phrase again. Little wolf. It made something deep in her chest respond, something that purred at the endearment even as her mind rejected it. "I'm not a wolf," she said. "I'm human." "Are you?" He leaned closer, inhaling deeply. "Then explain why you smell like pine forests and moonlight. Explain the dreams, the heightened senses, the strength you're still learning to control." "Stress." "Bullshit." The word came out as a growl. "You know what you are, Lila. You've always known, deep down. You just refuse to accept it." She tried to push past him, but he caught her shoulders gently, holding her in place without hurting her. "Let me go." "I can't do that." His voice was softer now, almost regretful. "You're my mate, Lila. My other half. Walking away from you would be like tearing out my own heart. I'm not your anything. You're everything." The words came out fierce, possessive. And whether you accept it now or in 10 years, that won't change. We're bound, you and I, by something stronger than choice, stronger than fear. Lila stared up at him, seeing her own wild confusion reflected in his silver eyes. For just a moment, the predator mask slipped, and she saw something vulnerable underneath. Something that looked almost like pain. Then the moment passed, and he was all dangerous alpha again. I won't let you run from this, he said quietly. Or from me. You can fight it all you want, little wolf, but in the end, you'll come to me willingly. They always do. The casual arrogance in that last statement snapped something inside her. She shoved against his chest with both hands, putting all her frustrated strength behind it. He didn't budge. Not even a little. She stared at her hands pressed against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palms. She'd put enough force behind that push to knock a normal man across the room. He'd absorbed it like she'd been pushing against a mountain. What are you? She whispered. His smile was all teeth. The same thing you are. You just haven't figured it out yet. With that, he released her and stepped back toward the door. Enjoy the rest of your shift, Lila. I'll be in touch. He was gone before she could respond, leaving her alone with the scent of winter forest and the terrible certainty that her life had just taken another turn toward the impossible. If you're still listening to this story up to this point, why don't you subscribe to this channel to continue getting impactful daily stories like this? We would be most grateful if you can do that to help boost this video to reach everyone. Thank you. Chapter 3. The panic attack hit Lila 3 blocks from the cafe, right in the middle of downtown's lunch rush. It started with the familiar tightness in her chest, the sensation of the world closing in around her. But this time was different. This time, her vision sharpened until she could see individual dust motes dancing in the afternoon sunlight. The cacophony of car engines, honking horns, and sidewalk conversations crashed over her like a tsunami of sound. She stumbled into the narrow alley between Thompson's Hardware and the old bookstore, gasping for air that tasted of exhaust fumes and something wilder, pine needles and damp earth that had no business existing in the heart of town. Her skin felt too tight, like she was trying to wear clothes 3 sizes too small. Heat radiated through her body in waves, and when she looked down at her hands, she could swear she saw them rippling, the bones shifting beneath the flesh. Not real, she whispered, pressing her back against the brick wall. It's just stress. Just another panic attack. But even as she said it, she knew this was different. The pain that shot through her spine was unlike anything she'd ever experienced, not quite agony, but close. Her fingernails ached, and when she held them up to the light, they looked longer, sharper. The rational part of her mind, the part that had gotten her through 24 years of perfectly normal human existence, screamed that this was impossible. People didn't just sprout claws. Bones didn't reshape themselves. This was the kind of thing that happened in movies, in the trashy paperback novels Maya was always reading. But the evidence was right there in front of her. Her hands were changing. A low whimper escaped her throat, and she was horrified to realize it sounded more animal than human. She needed help. She needed a hospital, or a psychiatrist, or... Another wave of heat crashed through her, and this time she felt her spine curve, vertebrae popping and stretching in ways that should have been impossible. Her vision blurred, then sharpened to a clarity that made the world look like it was rendered in high definition. She could smell everything now. The grease from the diner 2 blocks away, the perfume of a woman walking past the alley entrance, the fierce sweat of a man arguing with someone on his cell phone. And underneath it all, that pine scent was getting stronger, closer. Her clothes felt restrictive, suffocating. She clawed at her uniform shirt, buttons flying as she tore the fabric away from skin that burned like she was running a fever of 110. Please, she gasped to whatever deity might be listening. Please make it stop. But it didn't stop. If anything, it intensified. The bones in her face began to shift, and she pressed her palms against her cheeks, feeling her jaw elongate under her touch. Her teeth ached, sharp points pressing against her lips. When she ran her tongue over them, she tasted copper. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. But when she looked down at her hands again, there was no denying what she saw. Claws had emerged from beneath her fingernails, real claws, curved and lethal. Her fingers were longer, more graceful, and covered in a fine down of silver-gray fur. Fur. The scream that built in her throat came out as a howl, long and mournful and utterly inhuman. It echoed off the brick walls of the alley, and somewhere in the distance, she heard another howl answer. Then the real pain began. It felt like every bone in her body was breaking and reforming, every muscle stretching and reshaping itself. She collapsed to her knees on the dirty asphalt, her spine arching as something tried to push its way out of her lower back. Her vision went white, then red, then settled into a spectrum of colors she'd never seen before. Through the haze of agony, she heard footsteps. Heavy, purposeful, moving with the kind of predatory grace she'd learned to recognize. "No," she whimpered, though the word came out distorted by her changing mouth. "Not now. Not him." But it was him. Of course it was him. Cale appeared at the mouth of the alley like he'd materialized from shadow, his silver eyes taking in her transformation with something that looked like relief rather than shock. "It's all right," he said softly, approaching her like she was a frightened animal, which, she supposed, she was becoming. "I'm here. You're safe." "Stay back," she managed, though her voice was barely recognizable. "Something's wrong with me." Something's. Another wave of change hit her, and she felt her spine lengthen, tailbones that had been dormant her entire life suddenly springing to painful life. She gasped, then whimpered, then made a sound that was purely wolf. Cale was beside her in an instant, his jacket already off and draped over her shoulders. "Don't fight it," he murmured, his hand stroking her hair with surprising gentleness. "The more you resist, the more it hurts." "This isn't real," she sobbed. "People don't just turn into wolves." His voice was calm, matter-of-fact. "You're right. Most people don't. But you're not most people, are you, Lila?" She tried to look up at him, but her vision kept shifting between human sight and something sharper, more primal. In her new vision, Cale practically glowed with an inner light, and she could see the truth of what he was written in every line of his body. Not human. Had never been human. "What's happening to me?" she whispered. "You're coming into your birthright." His hand moved to her back, fingers finding the exact spots where the pain was worst and somehow easing it. "Your first shift. It's always the hardest." "Shift." The word came out as half growl, half question. "From human to wolf form. It gets easier, I promise. But the first time." He shook his head. "I'm sorry you had to go through this alone. I should have been watching more carefully." The pain was starting to ebb, replaced by a strange sensation of rightness, like pieces of herself she'd never known were missing were finally clicking into place. She could feel her body settling into its new configuration, longer limbs, enhanced senses, muscles designed for speed and power. "I don't understand," she said, and was relieved to hear her voice sounding more human again. "This is impossible." "Is it?" Cale settled more comfortably beside her, his presence somehow anchoring her in the chaos of transformation. "Haven't you always felt different, Lila? Like you didn't quite fit in your own skin?" She had. God help her, she had. But admitting it felt like stepping off a cliff into free fall. "My grandmother," she said suddenly, the memory hitting her like a physical blow. "She used to tell me stories about wolves. About people who could become wolves. I thought they were just fairy tales." Cale's expression darkened. "Your grandmother was Eleanor Silvermoon." It wasn't a question, and the way he said the name made her blood run cold. "How did you know her name?" "I never told you." "Because I've been looking for you my entire life." He shifted beside her, and she caught a glimpse of something wild flickering in his eyes. "Your grandmother made me promise to protect you, Lila. With her dying breath, she made me swear I'd keep you safe." The world seemed to tilt around her. "That's impossible. Grandma Ellie died of cancer when I was 16. She was in hospice for weeks. You couldn't have been there, you would have been, what, 19? 21, he corrected quietly. And she didn't die of cancer. The words hit her like a physical blow. What? Your grandmother was murdered, Lila. Along with the rest of your pack. You're the only one who survived. She stared at him, feeling the fragile new equilibrium of her transformed body threatening to shatter. You're lying. I wish I was. His voice was heavy with old grief. The Silvermoon Pack was one of the oldest, most powerful bloodlines in North America. Your grandmother was their alpha, and you're her heir. The last heir. That's not possible. I'm nobody special. I'm just the most powerful unmated female werewolf on the continent, he finished. Do you have any idea what that makes you worth to someone like Marcus Ravenclaw? The name meant nothing to her, but the way Cale said it made her skin crawl. Who's Marcus Ravenclaw? Cale's jaw tightened. My former beta. My former friend. And currently, the biggest threat to your life. Before she could ask what he meant, another scent hit her newly enhanced senses. Male. Aggressive. Dangerous in a way that made every instinct she'd never known she possessed scream warnings. Cale was on his feet instantly, his body shifting into a protective stance between her and the mouth of the alley. He's here. Who's here? But even as she asked, Lila already knew. The same way she somehow knew that the man approaching them meant her harm, that his scent carried the promise of violence. Marcus. Cale's voice had dropped to a growl. Stay behind me, Lila. No matter what happens, stay behind me. The man who stepped into the alley was everything Cale wasn't, lean where Cale was broad, fair where Cale was dark, cold where Cale radiated heat. But there was no mistaking what he was. The same predatory grace, the same inhuman stillness, the same silver eyes that seemed to glow in the shadows. Well, Marcus said, his voice cultured and smooth as aged whiskey. The lost princess finally awakens. How convenient. Lila struggled to her feet, Cale's jacket clutched around her transformed body. She felt raw, vulnerable, like a newborn learning to walk. But there was something about this stranger that made her want to bare teeth she was still getting used to having. Marcus. Cale's greeting was flat, emotionless. You're trespassing. Am I? Marcus smiled, and it was nothing like Cale's dangerous grins. This smile was cold as winter, sharp as broken glass. I thought this was neutral territory. Public property. Nothing is neutral when it comes to her. Her. Marcus's gaze moved past Cale to settle on Lila, and she felt his attention like ice water in her veins. The last Silvermoon. Do you know what you are, little wolf? Do you know what your bloodline represents? Don't talk to her. Cale stepped sideways, blocking Marcus's view again. Say what you came to say and leave. What I came to say? Marcus laughed, and the sound made Lila's new wolf instincts howl warnings. I came to see for myself if the rumors were true. If Eleanor's granddaughter had finally manifested. If the prophecy might actually come to pass. What prophecy? Lila found herself asking, though Cale shot her a warning look. Marcus's smile widened. The one that says whoever claims the last Silvermoon as mate will unite the Eastern Territories under one rule. Whoever bonds with you, sweet Lila, becomes the most powerful alpha in 1,000 years. The blood drained from her face. That's not. I'm not. Oh, but you are. Marcus took a step closer, and Cale shifted to intercept him. Pure Silvermoon bloodline, unmated, and finally awakened to your wolf. You're quite literally the prize every alpha from here to California has been dreaming of. She's under my protection, Cale said quietly, but there was nothing quiet about the menace in his voice. Your protection. Marcus circled them slowly, staying just out of Cale's reach. But not your mate. Not yet. Which means she's still fair game. Over my dead body. That can be arranged. Marcus stopped moving, his attention fixed on Kale with predatory focus. Challenge me for her, Blackthorn. Winner takes all. No. The word came from Lila, stronger than she'd expected. Both men turned to look at her, and she straightened despite the weakness still flowing through her newly changed body. Nobody takes me. Nobody owns me. And I don't know what kind of supernatural politics you're all playing, but I want no part of it. Marcus laughed again. You think you have a choice. Sweet, naive little wolf. Your bloodline makes you a target whether you want to be or not. The only question is which of us will be strong enough to claim you. Neither of you. She stepped out from behind Kale's protective bulk, ignoring his sharp intake of breath. I don't belong to anyone. You belong to me. The words came from Kale, low and possessive and utterly certain. You've always belonged to me. And there's the truth of it. Marcus clapped slowly, mockingly. The great Kale Blackthorn, reduced to stalking an ignorant human because his wolf recognized her before her own awakening. Tell me, old friend, how long have you been watching her? How long have you been waiting for this moment? Kale's silence was answer enough. Since she was 16, Marcus continued, clearly enjoying Kale's discomfort. Since her grandmother's death. How romantic, watching over a grieving child, waiting for her to grow up so you could claim her. It wasn't like that, Kale said through gritted teeth. Wasn't it? Then why don't you tell her the truth about her grandmother's death? Tell her how Eleanor Silvermoon really died. Lila felt something cold settle in her stomach. Kale? For a long moment, he didn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. She was trying to protect you. There were others who knew about your bloodline. Who wanted to use you. Your grandmother gathered what remained of her pack and made a stand. And? Marcus prompted when Kale fell silent. And they were slaughtered. The words came out harsh, brutal. Every last one of them. Eleanor held them off long enough to get you to safety, then died fighting to protect the secret of what you were. Lila felt the world spinning around her. Who? Who killed them? That, Marcus said with obvious satisfaction, is the question, isn't it? Because whoever it was, they're still out there. Still hunting. And now that you've awakened. He shrugged. Well. I imagine they'll be very interested to learn that the last Silvermoon has finally revealed herself. You're lying. But even as she said it, Lila knew he wasn't. The truth was written in Kale's guilty expression, in the way he couldn't quite meet her eyes. Am I? Then ask yourself this, little wolf. Why do you think Kale has been so desperate to claim you? Why the sudden rush to make you his? It's not just desire, though I'm sure that plays a part. It's because he knows what I know, what every alpha in the country will know soon enough. Marcus stepped closer, and this time Kale didn't move to stop him. You're not just powerful, Lila Silvermoon. You're a target. And the only thing standing between you and a very unpleasant death is the protection of a bonded mate. His smile was sharp enough to cut. The question is, which of us will you choose? Before either she or Kale could answer, Marcus dissolved into shadow, leaving behind only the scent of cold mountain air and the echo of cruel laughter. They stood in silence for a long moment, the weight of revelation settling around them like ash. Is it true? Lila asked finally. All of it? Kale's shoulders sagged. Most of it. The part about my grandmother being murdered? Yes. The part about me being some kind of supernatural prize? Yes. His voice was barely audible. The part about you watching me since I was 16? A longer pause. Yes. She nodded slowly, feeling something inside her chest crystallize into cold, hard resolve. Then we need to talk. And you're going to tell me everything. Starting with who really killed my family. Kale looked at her then, and she saw something that might have been pride flicker in his silver eyes. Everything? Everything. Because if I'm really as powerful as you all seem to think I am, then I'm done being anyone's victim. She straightened, feeling the truth of her heritage settling into her bones like armor. The Silvermoon pack ends with me, fine. But it's going to end on my terms. And Marcus? Lila smiled, and felt her new wolf teeth flash in the shadows. Let him come. I may be the last Silvermoon, but I'm still a Silvermoon. And it's time I learned what that really means. If you're still listening to this story up to this point, why don't you subscribe to this channel to continue getting impactful daily stories like this? We would be most grateful if you can do that to help boost this video to reach everyone. Thank you. Chapter 4. The first sign of Marcus's attack came at 3 in the morning, when Lila's newly awakened senses jolted her from sleep with the scent of foreign wolves circling her apartment building. She rolled out of bed, her body moving with a fluid grace that still surprised her. 3 days had passed since her first shift, 3 days of learning to navigate her enhanced senses and the strange new awareness of her wolf nature. Kale had insisted on moving her to a safe house, but she'd refused. Running felt too much like surrender. Now, crouched by her bedroom window in nothing but an oversized t-shirt, she wondered if her stubbornness had been stupidity instead. The wolves were trying to be stealthy, but to her enhanced hearing, their padded footsteps sounded like thunder. She counted at least 6 distinct heartbeats, all moving with the coordinated precision of a hunting pack. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Maya. Are you okay? I had a weird feeling. Call me. Relief flooded through her. Maya. Her anchor to the human world, the one person who'd stood by her through every crisis in her adult life. She grabbed the phone, fingers flying over the keys. Something's wrong. Wolves outside. Can you? The apartment's front door exploded inward. Lila dropped the phone, her body already shifting in response to the threat. The transformation came easier this time, her bones flowing like water into their new configuration. Within seconds, she stood on 4 legs instead of 2, silver-gray fur bristling with aggression. 3 wolves padded into her living room, their eyes glowing amber in the darkness. They were massive, larger than any natural wolf had a right to be, with the intelligent, predatory gaze that marked them as shapeshifters. The lead wolf's lip curled back, revealing teeth like ivory daggers. His scent carried Marcus's signature, pine and winter storms, but colder, more aggressive than Kale's earthier musk. Where is she? The thought came through the pack bond that connected all wolves, a mental voice rough with command. Lila's wolf bristled at the intrusion. This was her territory, her den, and these males had no right to be here. A growl built in her throat, low and dangerous. The lead wolf's head swung toward her, and his eyes widened in surprise. The female. She's already shifted. Too easy, came another mental voice. Marcus said she'd be helpless. Marcus said a lot of things. They circled her like she was prey, but Lila's wolf knew better. She might be newly awakened, but she was no helpless human anymore. Power thrummed through her veins, ancient, primal, and utterly feminine. The power to create, to nurture, to defend what was hers. The power to destroy anything that threatened her pack. The lead wolf lunged first. Lila met him mid-leap, her jaws finding his throat with an accuracy that surprised them both. He was larger, heavier, but she was faster and driven by a fury she'd never experienced as a human. They crashed into her coffee table, sending books and magazines flying. The other 2 wolves moved to flank her, but she was already spinning away, her claws raking across the leader's ribs as she broke free. Blood, his blood, filled her mouth, and her wolf sang with vicious satisfaction. She's stronger than she should be, one of the others growled, circling warily. She's untrained. Overwhelm her. They attacked in unison, but Lila was no longer there. Her wolf's instincts had taken over completely, and she moved like liquid silver in the darkness. Teeth snapped where she'd been standing. Claws whistled through empty air. She was behind them now, her jaws closing on the smaller wolf's hindquarters. He yelped and spun, but she was already gone, dancing away from his retaliatory strike. What is she? The lead wolf's mental voice carried a note of fear now. Before anyone could answer, her apartment door burst open again. This time, it was Kale who filled the doorway, his massive black wolf form bristling with rage. Behind him came two more wolves, his betas, she realized, their scents familiar from the cafe. The battle that followed was chaos. Snarls and growls echoed off the walls as 7 wolves turned her small living room into a war zone. Furniture splintered under massive bodies. Her landlord's deposit was definitely forfeit. Through it all, Lila found herself fighting alongside Kale with an ease that should have been impossible. Their movements synchronized without conscious thought, her attacks flowing seamlessly into his, covering each other's blind spots like they'd been pack mates for years instead of days. Behind you, his mental voice whispered across their forming bond, and she ducked just as claws whistled over her head. Left flank, she warned, and he spun to intercept a wolf she'd sensed but couldn't see. They moved like two parts of the same predator, and Marcus's wolves began to retreat. But not before one of them got lucky. Lila was engaged with the largest of the intruders when she heard Kale's mental roar of pain. She spun to see him pinned beneath 2 wolves, their teeth buried deep in his shoulder and flank. Blood, too much blood, stained his black fur. The sound that emerged from her throat wasn't entirely wolf. It was deeper, more primal. The sound of an alpha female defending her mate. The command in it was absolute, undeniable, and every wolf in the room, including Kale, froze in response. Power flooded through her, ancient and terrible and completely feminine. She felt it reach out like invisible hands, wrapping around the minds of every shifter in the room. Marcus's wolves whimpered and dropped to their bellies, unable to resist the compulsion in her alpha voice. Submit, her wolf commanded, and they had no choice but to obey. Even Kale's betas lowered their heads in unconscious deference, though their alpha remained standing. His silver eyes met hers across the destroyed room, and she saw something that might have been off flicker in their depths. Alpha female, he whispered across their bond. My God, Lila. You're an alpha female. The implications of that hit her like a physical blow. Alpha females were legends, myths whispered around pack fires. There hadn't been one born in over a century. They were the mothers of dynasties, the queens of the supernatural world, rarer and more precious than anything else in existence. And she was one of them. The knowledge should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like coming home. She held Marcus's wolves in thrall for another heartbeat, then released them with a mental shove that sent them scrambling toward the door. They fled without a backward glance, their tails tucked in submission. Only when they were gone did she shift back to human form, her enhanced healing already closing the minor cuts she'd sustained in the fight. Kale's betas followed suit, becoming 2 men in their 30s who looked at her with a mixture of respect and wariness. Alpha, the taller one said, inclining his head in a formal bow. We are honored. But Lila's attention was entirely focused on Kale, who was still in wolf form and bleeding onto her hardwood floor. The wounds were deep, too deep for even werewolf healing to handle easily. Shift back, she ordered, dropping to her knees beside him. Let me see how bad it is. He shifted slowly, painfully, his human form revealing the true extent of the damage. 3 parallel gashes ran from his shoulder to his elbow, and there was a puncture wound in his side that was bleeding freely. Hospital, she said, reaching for her phone. No. His voice was weak but firm. No hospitals. They can't treat our kind properly. Then what? You're bleeding out on my floor. Pack healer, one of his betas said. But she's 2 hours away, and... He didn't finish the sentence, but Lila could see the doubt in his eyes. 2 hours might be too long. There's another way, Kale said quietly, his silver eyes finding hers. But you won't like it. Tell me. The mate bond. If we complete it, our life forces link. Your alpha healing could save me. The words hung in the air between them like a challenge. Complete the mate bond. Give up her freedom, her independence, everything she'd fought for since discovering what she was. That's not a choice, she said. That's coercion. It's survival. His breathing was becoming labored, his skin taking on a grayish pallor that terrified her. Mine and yours. Marcus won't stop, Lila. This was just the beginning. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed with an incoming call. Maya's name flashed on the screen, and Lila grabbed it gratefully. Maya, thank God. Something terrible has. I know. Maya's voice was strange, distant. I know exactly what happened. Something cold settled in Lila's stomach. What do you mean? I mean I've been watching your apartment for the last hour, waiting to see if Marcus's wolves would succeed. The phone slipped from Lila's nerveless fingers. What? Did you really think it was a coincidence? Maya's voice continued from the speaker, tinny but clear. Me befriending you in college? Me always being there when you needed someone? Me knowing exactly when to text you tonight? No. The word came out as a whisper. I've been reporting to Marcus for 8 years, Lila. Every detail of your life, every routine, every weakness. He's been planning this since you were 16 years old. The betrayal hit her like a physical blow. 8 years. Maya had been lying to her for 8 years, pretending to be her friend while feeding information to her enemies. Why? She whispered. Because Marcus promised me something Kale never could. A place in the new order he's building. Power. Status. Everything I've ever wanted. You're human. You can't. I'm not human. Maya's laugh was bitter. Haven't been for 3 years. Marcus turned me himself, made me part of his pack. Did you really think a human could get so close to the last silver moon without supernatural help? The phone went dead. Lila stared at the blank screen, feeling something inside her chest crack and shatter. Maya. Her best friend, her sister in everything but blood, the one person she'd trusted completely. Gone. Worse than gone, revealed as an enemy. The grief hit her first, raw and devastating. Then came the rage. This time, her shift was different. Power flooded through her transformation, ancient alpha magic that had been dormant in her bloodline for generations. When she stood on 4 legs again, she was larger than before, her silver fur almost luminous in the darkness. Lila. Kale's mental voice was weak but urgent. Don't let the anger consume you. I've seen what happens to alphas who lose themselves to rage. But she was beyond hearing him. The betrayal, the lies, the years of manipulation, it all coalesced into a fury that demanded blood. She threw back her head and howled, the sound carrying a challenge that every supernatural creature within 10 miles would hear and understand. The last silver moon was done being anyone's victim. Lila, please. Kale struggled to sit up, his movements weak and unsteady. You have to choose. Me or your anger. You can't have both. His words cut through the red haze of her rage like a blade. She looked at him, really looked, and saw the man who'd been trying to protect her since she was 16. The man who'd been stalking her, yes, but also the man who'd risked his life to save her tonight. The man whose wolf had recognized her before her own awakening, who'd been waiting patiently for her to see the truth. Mate, her wolf whispered with sudden clarity. Our mate. Not her captor. Not her enemy. Her other half, bleeding out on her floor while she raged at shadows. The choice crystallized in her mind with perfect clarity. She could hold on to her anger, her independence, her wounded pride. Or she could save the man who'd given up everything to keep her safe. When she shifted back to human form this time, her decision was already made. The mate bond, she said, kneeling beside him. How do we complete it? Lila, you don't have to. Yes, I do. She took his face in her hands, feeling the fever heat of his skin. Because you're right. You're not my enemy, Kale. You never were. Maya. Maya made her choice. Now I'm making mine. She leaned closer, her lips barely brushing his. Tell me what to do. His silver eyes searched hers, looking for doubt, for regret. Finding neither, he reached up to cup her face with a blood-stained hand. It's not just magical, he warned. The bond, it's permanent. Forever. Are you sure? I'm sure. And she was. Her wolf had known from the beginning, had been trying to tell her from the moment they'd collided in the cafe. This man, this alpha, this impossible, infuriating, devoted male was hers. Had always been hers. Then kiss me, he whispered. Kiss me and mean it. Let your wolf choose mine. She did. The moment their lips met, power exploded between them. Not the violent, destructive force of her alpha rage, but something warm and golden and infinitely healing. She felt their life forces intertwining, felt his pain become hers and her strength become his. The mate bond snapped into place with an almost audible click, and suddenly she could feel everything he felt. His love for her, patient and enduring and deeper than oceans. His terror that she'd reject him, that she'd choose freedom over their bond. His overwhelming relief that she was safe, that she was his, that they'd found each other at last. And underneath it all, the healing power of their completed bond washing through his body like liquid starlight. When they broke apart, his wounds were already closing. Well, said one of his betas from somewhere behind them. That was intense, the other finished. Lila looked up at them, suddenly aware that she was naked and in the arms of a man who was also naked, surrounded by the ruins of her apartment. Heat flooded her cheeks. Perhaps we should give you some privacy, the first beta said diplomatically. To adjust to the bond. Good idea, Kale agreed, sitting up with ease that proved the healing had worked. And send word to the pack. Tell them their alpha has found his mate. As his betas retreated, Lila realized the true magnitude of what had just happened. She wasn't just mated now, she was mated to an alpha. Which made her alpha female of the Blackthorn pack, Kale said softly, reading her thoughts through their new bond. If you'll have us. She looked around at the destruction Maya's betrayal had wrought, thought about the war that was surely coming, considered the responsibility that now rested on her shoulders. Then she looked at Kale, her mate, her alpha, her impossible salvation, and smiled. Ask me again in the morning, she said. When we're not covered in blood and surrounded by splinters. His answering grin was pure wolf. I love you too, mate. And despite everything, the betrayal, the danger, the complete upheaval of her life, Lila found that she meant it when she said it back. If you're still listening to this story up to this point, why don't you subscribe to this channel to continue getting impactful daily stories like this? We would be most grateful if you can do that to help boost this video to reach everyone. Thank you. Chapter 5. The blood moon rose like a crimson wound against the star-scattered sky, and with it came a summons that neither Lila nor Kale could ignore. It arrived in the form of Marcus, appearing at the edge of the Blackthorn territory just after sunset with his hands raised in the universal gesture of parley. But there was something different about him now, something broken in his posture, desperate in his eyes. I need to speak with you, he called across the clearing where Lila and Kale had been training, his voice carrying none of its usual arrogance. Both of you. It's about the real enemy. Lila felt Kale's tension through their mate bond, his wolf bristling with suspicion. 2 weeks had passed since they'd completed their union, 2 weeks of learning to navigate the complex dynamics of being alpha female to his pack. She was still adjusting to the constant awareness of every pack member's emotional state, the weight of responsibility that came with their welfare. It's a trap, Kale growled, moving to place himself between her and Marcus. Maybe, Lila agreed, but something in Marcus's scent, fear, genuine terror beneath the familiar aggression, made her hesitate. But he's scared, Kale. Truly scared. When's the last time you've seen Marcus afraid of anything? Through their bond, she felt Kale's reluctant acknowledgement. Marcus Ravenclaw had always been fearless to the point of recklessness. Seeing him now, shoulders hunched and eyes darting to the shadows like he expected attack from any quarter, was deeply unsettling. 5 minutes, Kale called back. You have 5 minutes to explain yourself before I tear your throat out. Marcus approached slowly, his movements careful and non-threatening. When he was close enough for normal conversation, he stopped and met Lila's eyes directly. "Maya is dead," he said without preamble. The words hit Lila like a physical blow. Despite everything, the betrayal, the lies, the 8 years of manipulation, Maya had still been her friend once. The human part of her grieved even as her wolf remained unmoved. "How?" she asked quietly. "Executed." Marcus's voice was flat, emotionless. "For failing to deliver you as promised." Her handler decided she'd outlived her usefulness after your mating bond was completed. Her handler? Cale stepped forward, his voice dangerous. "You said you turned her. You said she reported to you." Marcus laughed bitterly. "I said what I was told to say. Maya never reported to me, Cale. She reported to someone much more powerful. Someone who's been pulling all our strings from the beginning." "Who?" Lila demanded. "Your father," Marcus said, looking directly at Cale. "Aldrich Blackthorn. The former Alpha who supposedly died in a hunting accident 10 years ago." The silence that followed was deafening. Lila felt Cale's shock through their bond, followed immediately by a rage so pure it nearly drove her to her knees. "That's impossible," Cale said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I buried him myself. I felt his death through the pack bond." "You buried someone," Marcus agreed. "But not your father. He's very much alive, and he's been orchestrating every detail of your life for the past decade. Maya's friendship with Lila, my rebellion against your authority, even your first meeting at the cafe, all of it planned, manipulated, designed to force a specific outcome." "You're lying." But even as Cale said it, Lila could feel his certainty wavering. "Am I? Think about it, old friend. How convenient was it that Maya was at the right college at the right time to befriend an unawakened Silvermoon heir? How fortunate that she was there to provide emotional support while Lila's grandmother died of cancer. How perfectly timed was my appearance just as Lila was having her first shift." Each question hit like a hammer blow. Through their bond, Lila felt Cale's growing horror as the pieces clicked into place. "Why?" she asked. "Why would he do all this?" "Because he's obsessed with creating the perfect alpha bloodline," Marcus said. "He discovered the Silvermoon prophecy decades ago, the one about an alpha female who could unite all the territories under one rule. When he realized Eleanor's granddaughter carried that blood, he became fixated on the idea of binding her to our family line. So he murdered an entire pack," Lila said, her voice deadly quiet. "He murdered everyone who might have taught you to control your power independently. Everyone who might have given you choices other than the ones he wanted you to make." Marcus met her eyes again. "You were supposed to be helpless, Lila. Dependent on Cale for protection and guidance. Instead, you've become something he never anticipated, an alpha female who thinks for herself." "Where is he?" Cale asked, and his voice carried the promise of violence. "Here. Tonight." Marcus gestured toward the blood moon hanging overhead. "He's been waiting for the lunar alignment, when werewolf powers are at their peak. He plans to complete a binding ritual that will make your mate bond permanent beyond death or choice, a mystical chain that will ensure the Blackthorn bloodline controls the Silvermoon power forever." Horror crawled up Lila's spine. Their mate bond was already strong, deeper than anything she'd imagined possible. But it was still a choice, something they maintained willingly. The idea of it becoming a mystical prison. "How do we stop him?" she asked. "That's the problem," Marcus said grimly. "The ritual requires 3 components, an alpha male, an alpha female, and the blood of the betrayer who brought them together. He has you and Cale. And now that Maya's dead, he didn't need to finish." Lila understood with crystal clarity why Marcus had really come to them. He wasn't seeking redemption or offering alliance. He was the betrayer whose blood Aldrich needed to complete his ritual. "You're the bait," she said. "I'm the bait," he confirmed. "He expects me to deliver you both to the old ritual ground at the heart of your territory. If I don't show up by midnight, he'll come hunting, and he won't come alone." "How many wolves does he have?" Cale asked. Enough. Rogues, mostly. Wolves he's collected over the years, promised power and territory in the new order he plans to create. Marcus's expression darkened. But that's not the real threat. Aldrich has been studying dark magic for decades, binding rituals and blood curses that go far beyond normal werewolf abilities. He's no longer entirely wolf, Cale. He's something else. Something worse. Before either of them could respond, a howl echoed across the territory, long, mournful, and unmistakably alpha. But underneath the familiar cadence of pack communication was something else, something that made every supernatural instinct Lila possessed scream warnings. Too late, Marcus said quietly. He's here. The attack came from 3 directions at once. Wolves poured out of the forest like a gray tide, their eyes reflecting the blood moon's crimson light. But these weren't normal wolves. Even in the chaos of battle, Lila could see the wrongness in them: elongated limbs, eyes that glowed with unnatural fire, movements that were too fast, too fluid. The pack house, Cale shouted over the sounds of combat, his body already shifting. Protect the civilians. But as Lila began her own transformation, a figure emerged from the darkness that made her blood freeze. Tall, broad-shouldered, with silver-streaked hair and eyes like winter storms. The family resemblance to Cale was unmistakable, but where Cale radiated warmth and life, this man carried the cold promise of death. Aldrich Blackthorn looked exactly like his son might in 30 years, if his son had sold his soul to darkness. My dear daughter-in-law, he said, his cultured voice carrying easily over the battle. How lovely to finally meet you properly. Power radiated from him in waves, not the clean, wild magic of a natural werewolf, but something twisted and wrong. The corrupted wolves fighting his enemies moved in perfect synchronization, like puppets dancing to his will. Father. Cale's wolf form was magnificent in the moonlight, but even he seemed small next to the wrongness that surrounded Aldrich. My son. Still playing hero, I see. Aldrich smiled, and shadows seemed to writhe around him. Still refusing to embrace your destiny. My destiny was never to become a monster like you. Wasn't it? You've claimed the Silver Moon heir, just as I planned. You've united our bloodlines, just as the prophecy foretold. The only thing left is to make it permanent. Lila shifted into her wolf form, her alpha power blazing like silver fire in the darkness. But as she prepared to attack, Aldrich raised one hand, and she felt invisible chains wrap around her consciousness. None of that, my dear, he said mildly. The ritual requires you alive and mostly unharmed. She struggled against the mystical bonds, but they held firm. Whatever magic Aldrich had learned in his years of study, it was beyond anything she'd encountered. Let her go, Cale snarled, but his father merely laughed. Or what? You'll kill me? We both know you don't have it in you, boy. You're too much like your mother, soft, sentimental, unwilling to do what's necessary for true power. The battle raged around them, but Lila could see they were losing. Aldrich's corrupted wolves were too strong, too coordinated. Her pack, Cale's pack, was brave, but they were fighting an enemy that shouldn't exist. The ritual ground, Aldrich continued conversationally, as if they were discussing the weather instead of mass slaughter. 3 miles north, where your great-grandmother first claimed this territory. Very symbolic, don't you think? I won't let you corrupt our bond, Lila managed, fighting against the mystical restraints. Corrupt it? My dear child, I created it. Every moment of attraction you felt, every surge of connection, all my design. The mate bond between you is built on a foundation of manipulation and blood magic. I simply planned to make it official. The words hit her like acid. Their bond, their love, their choice, all of it artificial. All of it the product of magical manipulation. Through their connection, she felt Cale's horror matching her own. But underneath it, something else, a steady, unshakable certainty that made her wolf sit up and take notice. No, his mental voice whispered across their bond. Whatever he did, whatever he planned, what we feel is real. Our choice to complete the bond was real. Our love is real. How can you be sure? Because I can feel the difference. His magic is cold, foreign. What's between us burns with life. As if to prove his point, warmth flooded through their mate bond, not the artificial heat of coercion, but the genuine fire of two souls choosing each other despite every obstacle. Aldrich must have felt it too, because his expression darkened. Stubborn children. No matter. The ritual will work whether you cooperate or not. He gestured, and Marcus stepped forward as if pulled by invisible strings. But where Lila had expected to see a broken ally, she saw something else entirely, a wolf who'd finally chosen his side. Actually, Marcus said, his voice steady despite the magical compulsion clearly fighting him, there's something you should know about your perfect plan. Before Aldrich could react, Marcus pulled a silver dagger from his jacket and drove it into his own chest. Marcus. Lila screamed, but he was already falling, blood spreading across his shirt in a dark stain. The ritual, he gasped, his eyes finding hers across the clearing. Requires willing betrayal. Can't use my blood, if I die by my own choice. Aldrich's roar of rage shook the earth itself. You fool. Do you have any idea what you've done? Bought them. A chance, Marcus whispered, then went still. The mystical bonds holding Lila snapped like broken chains. Around them, the corrupted wolves stumbled as their master's control wavered. The tide of battle began to turn. But Aldrich wasn't finished. No matter, he snarled, power coalescing around him like a visible storm. I'll simply have to improvise. The blood moon won't last forever. Dark magic erupted from him in waves, and Lila felt the crushing weight of centuries-old power bearing down on her consciousness. This wasn't just werewolf strength, this was something far older, far more dangerous. There's another way, she heard herself saying, the words coming from some deep well of inherited knowledge. The ritual doesn't require betrayal if both parties choose freely. Aldrich paused, his power still crackling around them. What are you talking about? A soul binding, she continued, the ancient words flowing through her as if spoken by her grandmother's ghost. Two alphas, joined by choice under the blood moon. But it requires sacrifice, a willing surrender of individual power in favor of shared strength. Lila, no, Kale's mental voice was sharp with alarm. Soul bindings are permanent beyond death. There's no undoing them. I know. She met his eyes across the clearing, seeing her own certainty reflected there. But it's our choice this time. Not his manipulation, not magical coercion. Our free will. Understanding flickered in Kale's silver gaze. A soul binding freely chosen would shatter any artificial bonds, any magical manipulation that had come before. It would make their mate bond unbreakably real, but it would also merge their souls so completely that neither could exist without the other. Together, he asked. Together, she confirmed. They moved as one, their wolves calling to each other across the space between them. But before they could complete the transformation, Aldrich struck with all his accumulated power. The blast of dark magic should have killed them both. Instead, it met something stronger, the combined will of two alphas choosing love over power, partnership over domination. Light erupted between them, silver and gold intertwining like living flame. The blood moon overhead seemed to pulse in response, and Lila felt ancient magic awakening in her bloodline, not the corrupted sorcery Aldrich wielded, but the clean, wild power of the first werewolves. Impossible, Aldrich breathed, his face going pale. Not impossible, Lila said, her voice carrying harmonics that belonged to every Silvermoon Alpha who had come before her. Inevitable. This was always how it was meant to be. The soul binding completed itself in a rush of sensation that left them both gasping. She felt Kale's consciousness merge with hers, felt their individual strengths becoming something greater than the sum of their parts. The artificial bonds Aldrich had woven around their original meeting shattered like glass, revealing the truth underneath. They had been manipulated into meeting. But their choice to love each other, to trust each other, to build something real from the ashes of deception, that had always been genuine. Aldrich made one last desperate attack, pouring every ounce of his corrupted power into a strike meant to shatter their newly forged bond. But the soul binding held, and more than held, it reflected his darkness back at him with compound interest. The backlash sent him flying into the forest. When the echoes died away, he didn't get up again. In the sudden silence, Lila became aware of the aftermath. The corrupted wolves had fled or fallen when their master's power broke. Her pack, their pack, was battered but alive. Marcus lay still in the clearing, but his sacrifice had given them the opening they needed. "Is it over?" she asked, hardly daring to believe it. "It's over," Cale confirmed, pulling her close. Through their soul bond, she felt his certainty, his relief, his overwhelming love for the woman who had chosen to bind her fate to his despite every reason not to trust him. "What happens now?" she whispered. "Now we build something new," he said, gesturing to the pack members who were emerging from the forest, drawn by their alpha's call. "Not a kingdom built on domination, but a family built on choice. A territory where strength serves protection instead of conquest." Lila looked around at the faces watching them, wolves who had accepted her as their alpha female not because of prophecy or bloodline, but because she had proven herself worthy of their trust. It wasn't the destiny anyone had planned for her, but it was the one she had chosen. "Together?" she asked, echoing his earlier question. "Always together," he confirmed, sealing the promise with a kiss that tasted of moonlight and forever. Above them, the blood moon began to set, its crimson light fading to silver as a new day approached. And with it came the dawn of a new kind of leadership, one built on partnership instead of domination, love instead of manipulation, choice instead of destiny. The silver moon line would continue, but not as Aldrich had planned. It would continue as something better, a legacy of love freely given and power shared in trust. As the first rays of sunlight touched the forest, Lila and Cale stood together at the heart of their territory, bound by choice and strengthened by sacrifice. The forced mate bond had become something infinitely more precious, a soul-deep partnership that would endure long after the last blood moon faded from memory. They had found their happily ever after not in spite of the manipulation and betrayal that had brought them together, but because they had chosen to build something real from the fragments of deception. And that, Lila thought as she watched the sun rise over their united territory, was the most powerful magic of all. Thank you for watching this video. Subscribe, like and share this video to continue listening to this type of story daily and also, to appreciate this community too. I would like to hear your wonderful opinion about this story. Please comment below.